sexy option, but I think he's a player who, could certainly could how do I put it? I think he's a winner. I think he knows exactly what what Mourinho demands of him, and I think that will play a big part. And he's only got a year left of his deal as well. They took the option to take another year on it, so hopefully that's still how do I put it? It kind of lowers the price, but it's still achievable for Tottenham. But again, guy in his early 30s, so I can understand where he might not be the kind of the pick of the bunch for some people. Højbjerg at Southampton, I think, is another one who's going to be in his last year of his contract. Possibly not the consistent player that you'd maybe go for, but he's certainly a player that has a lot of talent, but maybe hasn't made it at the biggest level. So it'd be interesting to see kind of what happens with him. But yeah, that's kind of, I'd think more you're going towards the latter two, or then you're looking at maybe working with what you've got, the likes of Winks, Skip as a younger player, even Foyth you could kind of mould into a defensive midfielder. So I'd probably say Matic out of all of those. But then I think Manu will have a big deal to say about that. Lolly Love asks, if Jose has a bad start next season, will Levy sack him? No. Levy's been chasing Mourinho for years. I can't see that a couple of bad months he'd be out the door. I think he'd give him a full season. Sorry, I'm aware of time, so I'm going to try and rock through some of these. Richard Pugh asks, who do you see as the best person designed to complement Kane up front? Oh man, again, this is going to be another one that people don't like, but I think Olivier Giroud, free transfer, World Cup winner, close friend of Lloris, knows the London game inside out. He's played for Chelsea and Arsenal, complete the set, a bit like Gallas. And I think in terms of having watched him at Stamford Bridge really cause Spurs loads of issues, I can see why. I think I can see him working really well alongside Kane and allowing Kane not to have to be that kind of battering ram type striker that Mourinho needs, which I think is probably going to not help Kane in his career as he goes on with injuries. Whereas Giroud could take, certainly in the short term, some of that. James Hilepo asks, have you heard anything on the Amazon sponsorship rumours? Haven't heard anything concrete, and I don't want to kind of suggest I have. I know Spurs this has been a long process, and I know they've kind of had inquiries from a lot of people, but never really found the kind of price they're looking for. Amazon stuff makes sense, of course it does. They're already obviously have the documentary. I haven't heard anything concrete on that. I think this current financial situation is going to be quite interesting to see how that works with Spurs and their demands over their sponsorship. The money they would be asking for perhaps will drop, which maybe will make something more realistic in the near future. But no, I haven't heard anything on Amazon, but that's not to say it's not the case. Khalid Al-Sayed asks, is Poch still in contact with the players, and do you think they regret not putting in the effort in his final months? He is still in contact with the players, we know that. Some of them are very close to him, call him a friend. Do they regret not putting in effort? I'd imagine they do. Dele Alli kind of alluded to it in his press conference just before, I think it was the first one after Mourinho was appointed, it was a Champions League one. He kind of said, I did look at myself afterwards. Yes, pretty much is the answer to both of those. Nathan Heath asked, does Eric Lamela still have a future at Spurs? Right. When I was talking earlier about bringing in Willian and then maybe getting some money for another player, unfortunately, and I say unfortunately because I really like Eric Lamela. I know he has his injuries, but I feel that every time he does get on a pitch, he kind of makes stuff happen for Tottenham, and I think he's quite an important squad player, but it's a big if about those injuries, and that's what leads me to believe that if Tottenham got a big bid for him, Serie A clubs really like him, from his time at Roma, I think they probably would take it just because of that insecurity over how many games you're going to get out of him a season. I'd love him to have a longer future because he loves Spurs, absolutely adores the club, he's so popular, and I do think if you look at the stats in terms of the goals he either scores or involved in, I think he does a lot for that team when he's on the pitch, and that's the crucial big if. I'd like to say yes, but my kind of brain tells me I think if they get a bid in the next couple of windows, unfortunately, he might be off. João Baptista asks, do you think failing to buy Bruno Fernandes was the biggest transfer failure at Tottenham in recent seasons? No. I know that sounds weird because I think he's an incredibly gifted player and I think he's going to do really good things for Man United, and I think Spurs obviously missed out. Is it the biggest transfer failure? No, I think it was not buying a striker. I think that was absolutely ridiculous. As soon as they knew Llorente wasn't going to be signing up for another season, I think they had to fix that striker problem. And I think that more than anything derailed Tottenham this season. Yassin Shakur asks, is Ruben Diaz a transfer we can get done? Ruben Diaz is certainly a player that Mourinho really likes. He's a player that Spurs have kind of looked at over the years. You know, he's a talented young player. Every club's going to be looking at him. There's going to be a relationship. I think his agent is Jorge Mendes, isn't it? Who's obviously has that pass with Mourinho. It's all, as I say, on that price, and then who goes out the door. If Vertonghen and, say, Foyth, who obviously his future is still unclear, they both go, does that create a bit of space and some funds, obviously from Foyth, not from Vertonghen, in terms of being able to bring in a player? Possibly. I still think, unfortunately, he would command a big fee, but I think out of all the defenders out there, he certainly would be a player that Spurs would love to get over the line. Elliot Horry asks, so that might be Honey, I can't read my own writing. I know it's a bit personal, but I'm interested in what this situation means for your job. Well, thank you for taking interest in that. It's different. It's very different. I'm going to have to be more creative, obviously, than in the past. Certainly, having no football about has caused me to have to write many very different articles that I wouldn't normally do, having to look back, having to look into the future, having to go deeper on players. I think it's been quite a fun exercise. Of course, I miss football. I'd love to be writing about it and the live form of it, but it hasn't completely turned my job upside down. It's just made it a bit more interesting. Let's put it that way. Rich Spurs 61 asks, how much time will Spurs get to train as a team when this ends? This is a bit of the unknown, but as I said earlier, I think we'll see a pre-season. I think there'll have to be one, whether it's 3-4 weeks. Personally, I do wonder whether the next season will have to come quite quickly after the resolution of this one. So any pre-season would almost, in essence, have to be for 2 or a season and 9 games worth. So I'd imagine they'll give them 3 or 4 weeks at least, which I think could play into Spurs' hands. I know every team kind of gets that, but I think in terms of having a new manager, especially Mourinho, I think it could be quite an important time. Alan McCarthy, or McCartney it might be, asked, did the Amazon documentary create a tension that led to Pochettino being sacked? No, I don't think so. I think, obviously, you could look back on that decision and wonder whether it was the right thing, but I think it's just something going on in the background, I'll be honest with you. From everything I understand, like the fixed cameras that are just up in rooms, I think people probably much forget about them. It's people like people in the Big Brother house, isn't it? You can see as time goes on, they just become the normal cells. So I wouldn't say that's led to any tension. I think there were far bigger kind of overarching things that kind of went back over seasons that led to that rather than an Amazon documentary. You know, fair play to them. They got in there and they're going to get an absolutely cracking documentary when it comes out. I think it's later this summer. Not Dave's channel asks, and this is our final question, given how honest journos can be about shortcomings of players, coaches and the ownership of clubs, does it cause a problem for you in your work? No, you get the odd moan. You get sometimes if you write something about a club, you know, in my experience, there'll be times that people at Spurs have had a bit of a moan, but you talk it through and you kind of explain. I think hopefully if anyone knows the way I write, I don't do anything just for the sake of it. I don't kind of write stuff just for the shock value. If I write stuff, it will pretty much always has to be really as a journalist sourced from a couple of places. So no, I don't think I've had the odd moan. I've had the odd people not too pleased with me. I've had the odd agent that's had a bit of a whinge. I've had one young player in particular who's now no longer at Spurs blocked me on Twitter because of a very honest appraisal of his performance in under-23s match. I'm not going to say the name, but I'm sure it can be people can work it out. I was unblocked though later. It's just stuff like that. You know, we've got to be honest. That's part of our job. We've got to also be objective. We can't just kind of lean, as I said earlier, in extreme views one way or the other. We have to kind of report as we see it and with all the kind of knowledge, hopefully, that we have on maybe slightly more behind the scenes things as well. So, no, I wouldn't say it causes a problem. And I think if you're worried about things causing a problem, I think you're not doing your job properly. So there you go. Thank you very much for those questions. They were really, really good ones. Apologies, I know we've just hit the 50-minute mark, but I really appreciate those, and it's good to talk, isn't it? Especially during these times when, we're all stuck in our houses, or many of us are. Obviously some people doing incredibly important jobs out there as well that can't be stuck in their homes, and this is why we're doing it, really, for them. So yeah, thank you very much. Hopefully we'll be back to normality sooner rather than later, and we'll have our football back. This is only temporary, it's not a permanent thing, and we'll get through it. Thanks for giving me something to do as well for the last 50 minutes or so. It's been great fun, and I shall catch you later. Look after yourselves and stay safe.